Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Impractical Machinist Podcast. My name is Patrick. You can find me on Instagram as @JobShopperTN.
I'm Cameron from Machining is Cool.
I'm Bradley with Marvel Machining.
On today's episode, we're going to give some updates on how our shops are doing, discuss deep hole drilling and boring, and talk about how we define success. I'm curious how your guys' shops are doing now that, we had the election last year. That happened. Things are changing. And a lot of times I've noticed in the 10 plus years I've been in machining that usually like January, February, things start to change after an election. And I know for us, the whole time we've been doing the podcast, I've talked about how we're slow. We need work. We're slow. It's coming. It's picked up quite a bit. And the funny thing is there's so much stuff that we quoted last year, November, December, October, and we're getting orders for it now. So I'm curious how that is for you guys.
I'm busy. I'd say my January, February sales are probably going to be about half of what I normally do in a year.
Damn, that's pretty good.
Wow.
I was just looking at it the other day and I was like, shit, I'm going to need to buy a machine this year.
Yep.
And I got 2 production jobs running. So it's, I'm setting up one. It's only 40 parts, but my horizontal's been running. I shut it off to record the podcast. So it's been 24/7 for the last 2 weeks. It hasn't stopped running.
I miss the days when 40 parts was a production run for me.
Yeah.
Not 10,000.
Yeah. Yeah. 40 parts. I'm happy. That's
Yeah.
nice.
And they're about an hour an op, 2 ops. So, but they have this, and I've never heard of it until I took this job. It's got a 3 MJ tap, and it's been a pain in the ass to find a tap and a thread gauge for it, but I think I got one coming.
Yeah.
Finally.
When you said something about that the other day, I looked it up. Yeah, it was like an MJ3 by 0.5.
Yep.
It's like it's a metric. Basically, it's M3 by 0.5, but
Yep.
the root of the thread is flat, isn't it?
Yep.
And
I think it's a tighter, minor diameter tolerance. I haven't really looked much into it, but you can get the tools in Germany. Everywhere has them over there.
I wonder what the purpose is.
I don't know. It says MJ threads or metric threads for aerospace are used in aerospace applications that require high stress or temperature. They are used in aircraft, rockets, and space stations.
There you go.
Require high
Right.
fatigue strength.
What about the male thread? Because I saw the thread profile of it for like the female thread.
Yeah.
I guess the male thread would have to match, but that would be a weird bolt
Yeah.
based on how that female thread looked. It'd be almost like you took a regular, if you took a regular M3 screw and turned like 10 thousandths off the OD of it, then you'd have like flat threads, like flat.
That is really strange. I've never heard of it. I actually thought you mistyped the J, and I was like, Brad, you don't have an M3 thread gauge? What's wrong with you?
When I first saw it on the print, I'm like, oh, that must be a mistake. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh shit, it's not. But it says there is a possibility that the internal MJ threads can be tapped with conventional metric thread taps by drilling the bored holes bigger. Well, I'll let you know how it goes.
Right.
Let us know when they get rejected.
I had to hand grind a high-speed tool bit today.
Really?
Yep. Which I enjoy it. I'll be honest. I learned that in tech school because the school didn't have any indexable tooling or nothing. So I learned how to do that and kind of practice with it over the years. And it's something dumb. I need to cut this customer wants to send us 25 pipes a week, aluminum 4-inch pipes. And all they want is for us to cut a groove in the pipe. Super loose tolerance. The width is plus or minus a 16th.
All right.
But it's like 344 wide. And we got to do it on the manual lathe because they're, like 7 feet long. So none of our CNC lathes have enough room to handle it.
What's the location tolerance?
plus or minus 30 or 60 or something super loose. I thought, you know what? It's aluminum. I'm gonna grind something I can just plunge in there and be done. Because the diameter's not tight, width ain't tight. I mean, it kind of just enjoyed that.
Did it work?
Well, we haven't got the material yet, but I'll let you know. I'm sure I'll have a video of it somewhere. Oddly enough, I have a little lathe that's actually at my mom's house. That before I moved out, I would play with it, and it's a tiny little thing. I mean, it's a 6-inch Craftsman lathe, tiny little thing. And it's so wimpy that carbide tooling really doesn't work on it. So that's kind of where I learned a lot of my grinding tool bits and stuff like that came from. And it's probably weird, but I enjoy it. I find it fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd much rather slap an insert in there
Yeah.
and call it a day. And I could probably do some research and find, I mean, the tolerance is loose enough. I could take a 3/8 wide grooving tool and plunge it in there and be done. But I don't know if it's worth it. It's not a very high dollar job.
I mean, I'm sure they make a 343 whatever
Mm-hmm.
groove tool. I don't know. Don't ask me about turning tools, though.
He's right.
Well, you probably get a broach and make it work.
Yeah. Keyway broach. Oh, boy. Or get silly with it and have like a... See, all right. This is the funny thing about this trade, man. You can, the expression, there's a million ways to skin a cat.
Mm-hmm.
You think about it, I mean, we don't have one, but if we had like a CNC horizontal, you could lay the pipe in some V blocks and come in with a key cutter and go around it and be done. And perfectly valid.
Yeah.
There's a guy I used to work with that is a programmer. He worked at a shop that did a lot of hydraulic stuff. And I remember one of the many stories that he told me. And one of the neater things that he told me was they had some kind of tube that they had to do. I mean, it's hydraulics. Almost everything's a tube or shaft. And the tube would come in. It had to be threaded on the board and threaded on the inside, turned and threaded on the outside. But the tube that they were buying, they weren't concentric with each other. Within, it was probably like 5 or 10 thousandths, but it's just tube, like DOM tube, chrome plated or something. So they couldn't really use a steady rest because the inside threads needed to be concentric to the ID of the tube, and the OD threads needs to be concentric with the OD of the tube. So he ended up having some crazy setup. I mean, they did production work. They had trying to think of what kind of machine it was. I want to say maybe a Kitamura, horizontal. And they had some hydraulic V blocks where you could lay the shaft in there. It had some kind of hydraulic strap clamp. He would come in and probe the outside, set that as a work coordinate, and then probe the inside, set that as a work coordinate. And then he would thread fill the threads on the OD and then the ID, and they'd be concentric. And I'm like, hey, that's creative,
I had a job that was similar to that I quoted, and I was thinking about throwing my horizontal and doing something like that. But I think I ended up passing on it. It was just ended up being too much. I'd probably take them pipes and stick them through the back of my rotary into the machine, and I'd just come down with an end mill and then rotate the rotary.
See, that's another option. Well, how big's the through hole in your rotary?
I don't know.
I was gonna say this is a 4.5-inch diameter.
Oh, yeah, no, that ain't
pretty big.
Cut a hole through it, bore it open.
I mean, you could. And I mean, the easy thing is just have a lathe with a big enough spit bore, but I mean, we don't. So what do you do? Fortunately, we've got a manual lathe long enough. I think the closing lathe has like 180 inches between centers or something.
Oh, damn.
Right.
Nice.
So it'll handle it just fine. And I'm not sure which way I'll go about it. I mean, I could have the steady rest on the far end and the carriage on that end, and just try to groove it with just the steady rest. But what I'm thinking about is actually clamping the ID of the tube and having the carriage up on that end and just working off the chuck.
Mm-hmm.
You could use the chuck as a stop, and
Yep.
just basically all you do is just run it into X0, back it out, and you're done.
Yep.
And then just have your steady out here to keep it from whipping and killing somebody. Very few, I'll put it like this, very few of them are wrong.
Right.
The best way is the way that gets you a part done the most efficiently with the most quality.
Yep.
But it's so easy to split hairs.
Yeah.
Do you ever have a problem, Brad, with like a little different situation in times past when you worked at other shops? Did you ever have a trouble with like deciding, okay, I've got 3 options that I could do to make this part. They're all kind of similar. I'm comfortable with all 3 of them, and I can't decide which one to do.
All the time. I mean, there's been times I've done it and I change it midway through.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's hard to see the problems along the way, and then you run into something. It's like, well, if I did it this way, I won't have to deal with that.
Especially if it's something with multiple ops, and I try to do as much as I can on the first op, get as many features as I can, and then flip it. But there's been times where I've gone to flip and it's like, shit, I should have done this side first and then flip it. I would have been able to hold it better, been more accurate on the second or third op. But sometimes I've had jobs come back and I'll do it a completely different way the next time.
Yeah. Well, in our case, I'm not saying things should be this way. Back when we did a lot more job shop work, if you will, when we got our live tool lathe, that kind of became like, okay, if you get a round part and it's got milled features, put it there, right? But just certain, what's the word, quirks about that machine and how we're tooled up for it made that take a lot longer than it should. So there was a lot of times where I might look at it and be like, okay, this needs to go on the live tool lathe. And then I'd get into programming it and I'd realize either we don't have enough live tools or clearance is going to be a problem. Alignment's going to be a problem. And then I just end up going back to, just a lathe and a mill.
I won't even know what to do if I had a live tool lathe.
Well, I know you wouldn't.
I'd be lost.
You'd be milling on it.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, what is it, Jeff, in the group chat that always says a live tool lathe makes a great meal?
I know Jeff and Colby say that.
Yeah, Kobe.
Colby.
Colby. Colby.
Make sure you yell in there, or else he gets mad at you.
Right.
Colby.
Speaking of lathes, let me tell you guys about the adventure I had today. So, if you're whoever's listening or watching, if you're unfortunate enough to have a turning center in your shop, make sure that every now and then you grease your chuck. If it's a hydraulic power chuck, and make sure that your jaws are getting grease. Not just give it a couple pumps and go on. Make sure that there's grease coming out, because guess what? We've probably ran 40, 50,000 cycles on our chuck, and it probably wasn't getting grease for half of it. So it all started with a crash we had. So I've talked about these bolts a blue million times. We're still running them. Going to keep running them. And the subspindle has a homemade parts ejector, because Haas doesn't have one that you can buy or put in your machine. And every now and then it gets hung up. I'm talking one out of every 1,000 parts. And usually the guy's right there at it. I mean, the guy we have running these bolts is very attentive. He stays there. He doesn't wander off. It just happened to be that right circumstance where it brought the part up, opened, didn't push it out. And then when it came up to grab the next part, bad things happened.
Yeah.
It actually pushed, this is amazing. It pushed the bar the machine part on the main spindle up into the main spindle to the point where the chuck actually wasn't grabbing on bar stock anymore. It pushed it up all the way in there to where it just closed in the rest of its stroke. And it didn't, I don't think it hurt anything too bad, all things considered. It just made a very funky noise when all of a sudden you've got a loose bar in your spindle that's spinning. That's not fun. So we've been having a couple of issues with the main spindle. Like the bar might push back a little bit when the rough turning tool gets worn out. So I thought, okay, it might be time to either recut these jaws, but maybe we need to look and see if this thing's actually getting grease and it's not just packed up with chips and not able to actually clamp. Well, it was getting grease. And it probably hasn't been greased in a while. So we got to taking the thing apart, which I will admit I'm a little rusty on. I mean, we don't really change chucks ever on the CNC lathes. And it's been probably 2+ years since I've been off for cleaning and maintenance. And I didn't do that. So I was a little rusty on how to get it off, and it turned into a nightmare. I think we started the process of taking it off at about 8 o'clock. And we didn't have it off at lunchtime at 11:30. On that particular machine, the draw tube is a 2-piece thing. You got the back end that's in your, couples to the hydraulic system, and then it joins in the middle with a second piece that then attaches your chuck attaches to it. Well, the draw nut in the chuck was seized on there so hard that it started unscrewing the whole draw tube, or the draw tube at the middle point.
Yeah.
And that started freaking me out because I haven't ever seen a 2-piece draw tube before.
Yeah.
The SL20s are 1-piece. So we started doing some looking, and the operator was looking on the Practical Machinist forum, which you should go check out. And I'm getting better at the segues.
Yeah, there we go.
And Reddit and things like that. And basically our option was try to unthread it and pull the whole thing out. Fortunately we had, and I don't know that this isn't why that draw tube is in 2 pieces. If it was 1 piece, we couldn't do that. It's like 40 something inches long plus the chuck. There's not enough room in that machine to get all that out. So after trying a whole bunch of different things to get it out right, we eventually yanked the chuck out with a draw tube on it. And then we had to figure out, okay, how in the world are we going to get these two apart? Because they're seized together. And it's kind of funny how, like, we've talked about how machinists can make woodworking overcomplicated. I mean, all three of us are that way.
Yep.
Well, even simple things like that, you can overcomplicate. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, if we don't have a strap wrench, we don't have anything to grab this thing with that's not going to scratch it up and put a bunch of burrs in it. So can we put it in the lathe? Put it in the lathe chuck to hold the tube and then try to break the draw nut loose. Don't have a lathe with a big enough through bore other than the one that we have the chuck taken out of. So we decide, the operator starts putting jaws on the SL30, which is big enough, which is an ordeal. And about halfway through that, the manual machinist got to looking and he got to helping, and he just grabbed hold of it with his hands because he's a stout old geezer.
With manual machinists. You got manual machinist hands.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's got them handle cranking muscles. So he grabbed hold of it, and another guy broke the draw nut loose, and we were able to get everything started taking apart. It was disgusting. Have either of you, well, Brad, I'm sure you've taken like a manual scroll chuck apart.
Yep.
Cam, have you ever seen a hydraulic chuck apart?
Not a hydraulic. I've done scroll chucks.
Okay. It's bad. It's amazing how much garbage can get in those, even though they're so tight everywhere.
Yeah.
But it don't matter. So we spent a good amount of time cleaning it, stoning it, getting everything back together. And then Cam's already heard my story of running all around the shop trying to find the grease gun, and then finding 3 grease guns, 2 of which don't have any grease, and I don't know where we store the grease. And the 3rd grease gun has grease in it, but the tip will not fit the chuck.
The what won't fit the what?
The tip won't fit the chuck. Yeah, I mean, it was a whole ordeal. I had to, at that point, I got the maintenance man involved to try to help me get the find the grease and all this other crap, because it goes back to stuff that we've talked about so many times. Like you need stuff in the right place where people can know where it is. It's going to be there, and it doesn't all need to be in one person's head or even just word of mouth. Because like there's actually a specific grease gun that he did buy for the lathes. I mean, we've got 4 CNC lathes. He bought 1 grease gun and the Chucky's grease, and I don't know at what point. So Avery, sorry if I'm getting the details wrong, but I don't know how long ago he bought it. But if it was a few years ago, that was also like 5 lathe guys ago. So nobody, probably don't remember. Anyway,
But it passed down that tribal knowledge.
exactly, and that's stuff that we need to avoid. Buying the grease gun for the lathes was a good thing. We just need to find a way to take it a step further to where if we hire somebody tomorrow, they know where it is.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's a problem a lot of places have. And we had the same thing going on at this place when I started and the last place I worked at. It's like you might have this stuff, but you have to ask 2, 3 people to figure out where it was. And then you go look where they told you they remember it being last and it's not there. And before you know it, you spend an hour just walking around the shop looking for one thing.
mhm.
But it's an easy
Exactly.
fix, you know?
Yeah.
Keep it in a place where it would make sense for it to be. Make it where it's make it obvious that it's there. Label it. Say, hey, grease gun over here.
Mhm.
I try to keep like items together. Cleaning and maintenance, right? Like grease guns, degreaser, oils, layout dye remover, all that stuff. Try to keep it all together. So then whenever
Mhm.
somebody's thinking about, all right, I need grease, where would that probably be? Oh, well, we keep all this like grease, like this stuff that's kind of in that same category as grease in this one cabinet. So it's probably over there. I'll go look and then there you go.
Mhm.
Now, I say it's an easy fix as far as like labeling it and stuff like that. That's something that we're good with on some things, but in this category, not at all. It's all in one cabinet. It's not super messy. It's laid out kind of neat, but nothing's labeled. Somebody might take something and not put it back in the exact same spot. So do as I say and not as I do on that one. But
That's always what it comes down to is like accountability, I guess.
yeah,
Because we found that extra grease gun after we were done with the other ones, um, and it was at the TL2 lathe, which I it's got grease fittings on it for the ways and stuff, but like you don't grease it that often. It really shouldn't have been there, and it wasn't with the other grease guns. So like if all the grease guns are in the manual part of the shop, behind the manual lathe, up on the red iron beam on the wall, that's where they all need to be.
yeah,
That's not where they need to be. Don't get me wrong, but you know, if somebody comes and gets it, it needs to be brought back. If it's empty, refill it.
yeah.
It's that simple.
I'll tell you what drives me nuts is people not refilling tape dispensers
Mm,
at our shipping table.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
End up with like 3 or 4 empty tape dispensers, and then there's like one with tape in it, or razor blades. I've got bins there. I've got like bins for the different size bags we use, and like bins for, it's just those like U line, like actually like this.
Oh yeah.
Which check it out, Pat. I got high speed steel in here.
Oh heck yeah. That's
So don't come and rob me. But yeah, so we have bins for all that stuff and like tape, razor blades, Sharpies, all that stuff. And I feel like half the time it just disappears and never makes its
Mhm.
way back. I want to take everything that belongs to that table and spray paint it pink. then if you see anything pink anywhere around the shop, you know it goes right back to that table.
Put strings on everything so they can't get pulled away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do like the ID badge thing,
Yep.
ID reel.
Yep.
There you go. I actually saw something, a funny meme, I guess you'd call it. Somebody had a Sharpie in their hand, and they were like, "My black Sharpie never gets stolen," and it was the cap was like a weird color, it was like yellow,
Yep.
but they took the cap off, and it was actually a black Sharpie.
I used to do the
So-
same thing. I would take because we weren't allowed to use red pens. We could only use blue and black ink. And so I would take a red pen and put a black ink cartridge, whatever, inside of it. So then everybody would see a red pen, nobody would take it.
That's hilarious. Long story short, I mean, we've got everything going now. We still need to clean the sub spindle because we're like, well, if we're going to clean the main, we may as well do the sub too.
You better take care of all of it.
Exactly. Do it all at one time. We're probably going to recut the jaws on both spindles and just do a
That's what we
whole
got.
reset.
Right in the middle of just a good production run. Everything's rocking and rolling.
The good thing is, we're making stock right now. So if we're down for 2 days,
or whatever.
doesn't
I
matter.
got you.
Um,
Where are y'all making stock? Do you have future orders?
Yeah, I mean, we expect future orders. It's kind of an interesting case where like the customer will order their own like bolts for themselves to resell, but then we also use them at the fab shop for the products that we build. I mean, we build the
Gotcha.
whole assembly, so we use some of ours, and then we sell. I think we actually started heat treating the ones that we use in house too. And then if we send out batches of 1,000 to Body Coat to have them heat treated, for nothing. It's super cheap. But just as like some busy work for the manual guy, he'll heat treat 20 or 30 of them at a time and send them over to the fab shop. So, yeah, it's been, I bet you, I'd like to get a number on it, but I bet you we probably made probably 4,000, maybe 5,000 bolts
Dang.
in the last 3 months.
It's a lot.
Yep.
How's that shoulder mill doing? Like a 1-inch?
I
or
love it.
2-inch?
I haven't had any problems with it. We flipped the inserts to the first edge, I think after about 600 parts.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
And it's crazy, man. I never would have thought a live tool lathe could handle a face mill like that.
I need to get one of those.
I'd recommend it. I can send you the part numbers and stuff, and
Yeah.
just see what kind of it's a newer line, so I'm sure if you've got a rep of that company in your area, they'd be happy to have you test one. But yeah, it's worked out real good. We've when I crunched the numbers, and I may have already said this, but our tool life or our tool cost went down to probably, I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, because y'all were burning through end mills.
Right. Yeah, we were going through a couple end mills a week.
Yeah.
Now we're probably looking at about $25 of tooling cost a week compared to 100 to 150.
Wow. Yeah.
And we've saved I think it's 23 seconds per part, which is huge on a 4-minute cycle.
Yeah. Especially
So-
that quantity.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's made huge. We're probably making one thing about that I've always kept in the back of my mind. It's easy to get wrapped up in when you're doing production. I got to get seconds. I got to cut seconds. I got to cut every bit of time I can, and spend 2 hours doing it to save a couple seconds on a cycle. And sometimes it's worth it. But one thing you have to watch is, okay, sure, I can save a few seconds, but how many more parts am I going to get per day?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's some cases, like, especially when you're running, like SB Solo does, when you're running big batches of parts at one time, and you've got 20, 30, 50 parts under the spindle at once, it may not matter, because if you cut a minute off of an hour cycle time, you're not going to run any more parts that day.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things. But in a lathe,
And
not so much.
it's so easy to get wrapped up in that, though. I'm definitely
Yes.
guilty of it. I've caught myself lately more and more just kind of letting things slide. Um, letting things slide in the sense of like not optimizing everything as much as I possibly can, which I've always kind of let some things slide because it's like, all right, I got to stop. I'll get too carried away trying to make this all perfect, and then we won't even make the parts today. um, but yeah, that's a slippery slope. You can go down that rabbit hole pretty quick and get stuck.
I'll tell you, I've started kind of. I think a lot of it. Well, I don't know. It's different for me. I get influenced by the people that I'm working with. So when we had a programmer that uh, came from a production oriented shop, I kind of absorbed from him. Okay, this is some easy ways to cut your cycle time
Right.
and make parts faster and stuff like that. Now I'm working with a guy that's more of a job shop, tool and die kind of programmer. So I'm picking up some interesting things from him. And
Is it more of like a take your time, just
yeah, and
go slow, but let it be right? You know, like
exact
slow
right.
but safe.
Yeah, it's quite different. Um and then when you've got like Brad, you don't worry too much. I mean, you do, I know, but like it doesn't matter if you cut 10 minutes off of a 2 hour runtime because it's running by itself. You can do other stuff in that time.
Yeah. I did on this job I'm running right now, 420 parts. I ran it last year and there was like 220 and I left it as is because I had plenty of lead time. But when this one came back through, I reprogrammed it. I shaved off, I think 22 minutes off the first op cycle and then
Yeah.
like 18 minutes off the second op cycle, which over 420 parts, it's a lot.
It's a pretty big deal.
That adds up.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But it's kind of one of the things where like it does add up, but I'm going to deliver these parts, I think 3 weeks early still.
Yeah.
So it's like I could have left it and just whatever. I mean, and in a shop where you got something scheduled to follow it, it makes sense to get ahead and get the next job in there. I don't have anything following it right now, so I'm not too worried about it. But
That's what always gets me. That's
Yep.
what gets me into that optimization loop that I'll get stuck in. It's like, and a lot of times I'm programming stuff before it even like goes out to the floor. So the machines are out there running while I'm in here programming, and I'm like, nah, I'll tweak this a little bit, tweak that a little bit, try to make it faster, try to make this faster, find some better tooling we can afford it for this job, switch to carbide drills, whatever. Because I'm like, we've got 100 jobs stacked up for the month, and we're struggling to like actually get them all done in time.
yeah,
So it's like, let me optimize this, make it as fast as I possibly can without like breaking tooling or anything. In order to like get that job done, get the next one on the machine and keep on going.
yeah,
For sure. I noticed when we were really slow for the last few months, I it's not a habit I want to get into, but I would program parts slower.
Yeah.
Just because there's not much point in hurrying when it's just going to mean the guy's going to run out of work sooner.
hmm
So if it can be 30 minutes less that he's got to push a broom around. I mean, it wasn't always that bad, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
A quick little tangent on cycle time optimization. Do either of you guys do a lot of peck drilling with IJK pecking?
no,
Get good. So, sorry. It's essentially just with G83, you can tell it to go in a certain amount and then have. I'm totally butchering this, but essentially, instead of your normal Q peck where it's just the same amount every time, you can go in so deep and then a little less deep and less deep and less deep until you hit a minimum peck.
Reduced peck.
And
Is that what it's called? Isn't it like a reduced peck cycle to where it effectively goes or something like that?
variable peck.
Yeah. That sounds good too.
And I do that quite a bit. I mean, just I'm used to it and it's easy to do in my cam. So, but one thing I got in a bad habit of doing is this is gonna sound so stupid. I would put in my numbers, like a 2 times DPEC to start, and then reduce it by 1 times, and then do like a half times DPEC after that. I would post out the code and see what the actual drill depth is, and make sure that I wasn't going to have like a tiny peck at the end. So I'd go back and I'd change one of the values to make it to where it was pecking about the same. Like if the minimum peck's a 1/4 inch, I didn't want it to end up at a quarter, and then like a 10 or thousandths
Peg or something.
yeah,
You go back down for hardly anything.
right. That drove me nuts when I'd see it. But I got to thinking, man, I'm wasting so much time with this, and it does matter. It can matter, but a lot of stuff I was doing it on, it didn't matter.
Yeah,
So
it depends.
it depends. That's right.
Yeah, that's one of those rabbit holes you can go down, and like it's a classic example of picking your battles. What I've
Go ahead.
what I've come to, I guess the theory that I've come to now is make everything like 90% perfect. Let like 10% of it not be perfect, because in
Mhm.
reality, that last 10%, because I've already gotten all the low hanging fruit by the time I've gotten to that 10% that's left.
Yep.
So then I can sit there and nitpick and spend forever trying to get that last 10% to be as optimum as it could possibly be. But what did I really save? I just spent a whole bunch of time. I spent 20, 30, 45 minutes taking off a minute and a half of cycle time or a minute of cycle time.
Yep.
And
Right.
we're not running thousands of parts, like 10 parts for us is production. Like we're doing nothing but setting up and tearing down all day.
Exactly.
So let it
You're
that last 10% go, because it's like the same theory on a machine. Like hurry up and get this job done so you can get to the next one. Well, I've got to do the same thing with programming. So I'm pretty much doing all the mill programming for the shop.
Mhm.
So it's like got a whole bunch of programming that I'm behind on all the time. And so leave that last 10%, let it be. They can go out there and run for a minute longer, finish up programming this, get the setup sheets done, and move on to the next one. So
exactly. I mean,
90% good.
in the 30 minutes you might spend tweaking that, I mean, Brad could have 5 more parts programmed.
You're right.
Um,
Default settings, man, they save the day.
Dude,
Mhm.
I have like 3 templates set up, and it's one's for aluminum engraving, and then one's for machining rock lock studs, and then I don't even remember what the third one is because I will never use it. I really need to get my shit together on that and actually like set up templates and have it where I can just like drop a template in and go. Because now on Fusion you can do like a whole bunch of operations all on one template,
Ah,
if
that's
I remember right. I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
you can, because I think that's how I have my that's how I have my 96 millimeter rock lock pattern set up. So it's got like the drill,
Cool.
the tap, the chamfer tool, the end mill, all that stuff. But yeah, so you can take like for us, for example, typically mild steel. A lot of jobs will start with like some gripper jaws, machine the full profile, and machine everything we can on one side, and then flip it into soft jaws and just finish off the back, right?
Yeah.
So you can take your typical operations for that, have all of that as one template. So whenever you have a new part, open it up, set up your stock and all that stuff, and then boom, add your
Mhm.
template, and you just define some depths or some contours, and then you're done. So
you can replace a part in there, right? If you got all your operations, you can just replace the part and then regenerate it and it'll update.
yeah, I'm like 90% sure there's a way to do that,
Yeah.
but
I'm pretty sure there is, because
but
someone in the group showed that and I was like, "Oh, that's kinda cool," and then
yeah,
I tried it in CamWorks and it works, but it's sometimes I'm like, "I don't know if I wanna deal with."
yeah, I
Yeah.
believe there's a component replace option. Um, there is actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I messed with it one day and then was like, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to figure that out later, and then stopped.
I do it every now and then, but most of the time I just like to start fresh.
Mhm.
SolidCam SolidCam has similar, like you can, you know, you can, save and copy your cam file, then bring in a new part, update your
You sh
target and all that stuff, but it's weird.
you should be able to replace, because 'cause you're in SolidWorks, so when I replace a
Mhm.
part, I replace it through SolidWorks, but I don't know, and I'm pretty sure CamWorks is a little bit more integrated than.
I think it is because it can be glitchy too. I mean, there's been times I usually only do that on parts that are like almost identical.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I might save off templates from this part and then make a whole new cam file, pull them into this,
Yeah.
the templates into this part, and go back and forth.
I'm still surprised you can't calculate your scallop height and solid cam.
I know. Well, I was actually about to say one more thing about like tweaking your cycle times. Surfacing is a bad one for me. I'm terrible about like I'll tweak a whatever the term might be in solid cam. It can be step down or step over. Um, I might tweak it from 5 thousandths to 6 thousandths just to see what the time difference is and then what the finish difference is in simulation. But then I lose sight of the fact that, and again, if you got a 10, 20 piece run, that's one thing. But I lose sight of the fact that it might take 5 minutes to calculate the tool path. Just depending on,
You need a
if it's
faster computer.
So in an hour, you recalculated it 5 times after tweaking it.
exactly, because I'll go back and forth over a few thousandths. And it's like, just go with something. I'm terrible at that.
Sometimes I'm jealous of people who aren't perfectionists, and they're just like, "Yeah, I'll just throw a number at it, be all right," and then move on to something else.
Make life a lot easier, man.
Yep. I've
So it
started.
is nice having the scallop height because sometimes you can just throw in a scallop height and then see what the step over is going to be. But sometimes I do that. I'm like, I'll throw in a 1,000 scallop height and it'll show me like a 30,000 step over. And I'm still like, oh, that's way too much. Let's just go
Right.
back to 10.
It doesn't feel right, does it?
Nope.
Mhm.
Doesn't feel right at all.
I get that.
I've started surfacing stuff whenever I can. So we keep 1/2 inch reduced neck end mills, sharp corner also, but I'm referring to the 1/8 corner radius.
Yep.
Reduced neck end mills, and so we keep those in stock. And so whenever I can, I'll actually surface stuff with that. As long as it's applicable. But I like doing that because they're 5 flutes. I'll run that even in mild steel. I mean, it's taking such a light cut. You're not getting any heat in the cutter or in the
Yeah.
material. So I'll run it at like 12,000 RPM and just let it rip.
Yep.
And haul ass. I mean, you'll be like 12,000 RPM and like 200 inches a minute surfacing something versus using like, the way I used to do it, I'd use, like a 1/2 inch ball nose and run it at like, 7,000 RPM.
Yeah.
And then stupid slow. So even though my step overs, I'm going to have more step overs, I'll still run that way faster. Than I would a ball nose.
I guess, boys, we can move on to the drilling and boring topic.
Boring.
More. Yeah. Somebody asked me to bring up our opinions and experiences with deep hole drilling and boring.
Okay.
And I'll say I don't have much experience with deep hole drilling and boring.
That's not what you were telling us before.
Yeah.
No, I don't have much experience with it either. I mean, the only thing I've ever done is the one video of my right angle head where I drilled that 36-inch hole.
Yeah. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Didn't you go from both sides?
Yep.
On that part?
I went 18 inches on each side.
That was
And
wild.
ended up.
Yep. And it lined up. That hole was a 375 plus or minus 5. And I drilled from both sides. I drilled and reamed 3 inches down, hoping that would help as a guide.
Yeah.
On each side. And when I was done, I stood that thing up on its end and I dropped a 374 pin through and it went right through.
Yeah.
375 got stuck in the middle.
Wow.
It was just a
Wow.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's cool. So, surprisingly, I guess I've done the most out of it out of us three. So, my biggest experience with it, I guess it depends on if we're talking a lathe or a mill application. I'm a big fan of spade drills for deep holes. We have quite a few spade drills for. I don't know. I think they're the long variety, so they're like. I was just looking at one today. We have one that'll go up to like a 3-inch diameter insert, and it'll do. Oh yeah, it'll do. Without any like holder shenanigans, I think it'll do about 11 inches deep. Most of the stuff that we've done with those spade drills is not real critical, but I'm always impressed with how close they usually are. I mean, they stay really straight, even with no spot or pilot. I don't think I've ever had a situation where I've had to do an extra long one And I know when you get into that, sometimes you have to have either a spot or like a stubby pilot drill and then chase it with the long drill.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to throw up my infamous video about the deep drill that everybody told me to buy a gun drill for right about now. And I mean, listen, it works. So, you get a good spot and then you go in with a screw machine drill and then you chase it with an aircraft extension drill. You got a stubby flute and then a long body. That's probably what you used, wasn't it, Brad?
No, it was a full flute.
Really?
The only one I
Wow.
could find, yeah.
Wow.
I tried to find an aircraft one, but I couldn't find one.
I'll be darned. But I've done, that was in, I think, just mild steel, and it was a 1/2-inch hole, 8 inches deep or so. So it's not crazy, but it's getting out there. I mean, it's 16 times D. The worst one I've done is, of course, in stainless, luckily 303 stainless, 3/16 hole. I actually had to go through a shaft that I think is 19 inches long. But luckily, because of the nature of it, we could go halfway from each end. So you're still talking like 9 inches deep on a 3/16 drill, and that's how we did it.
Was that like a grease hole for a pin or something?
So it's something like that. It allowed fluid, air, water, oil, something to go through it. Matter of fact,
Something went through it.
yeah, something went through it, and it didn't have to be
Hole.
3/16. We actually, you guys are gonna laugh at me for this one. Before I started, all right, so don't blame me. Apparently, we had one of these shafts that we either had to make or fix, and they did it on a manual lathe. And they drilled that hole on a manual lathe and broke the drill. But they broke it in a way where it broke and the flutes were in there, but the solid part come out. It worked. The fluid was able to, I think it broke when it broke through into the middle.
Yeah.
And they were able to get enough whatever fluid, oil.
They just were
in there.
Yeah. So yeah, we left it in there. Ain't no way we're getting that out.
No.
And send it out to a shop to sinker it out.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
we
it
got one.
I feel like you could probably press it through somehow.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe
That
it has
was,
from the other side.
yeah, that was before the internet, so I mean, I couldn't find. Well, they couldn't find
Or
me
the internet.
then.
Yeah, you could take a 3/16 dowel pin and figure out how to get hydraulic pressure behind it.
Do like Brad does with the shrink fit
Put a
holder.
3/16 dowel pin in the end of there, or just well, you could just plug weld the end of it. Then fill it with water first, and then start welding it. Maybe it'll just push it right through.
Mm-hmm.
It might.
No.
And then as far as boring, I mean, I don't have a ton of experience with like what I would consider deep hole boring. I mean, I've gotten up to like maybe 6 or 7 times D just with a solid carbide boring bar, and this is a lathe. I've not done anything crazy deep in a mill like that. I mean, I hate to say it, all of our boring heads are junk. However, we had a job recently that a big nasty weldment that we're probably not going to go this route, but it in theory it would require either line boring or a really good boring bar to get 2 holes over 3-inch hole 12 inches apart, and they need to be in line with each other, and it's like through, I think, a 1-inch thickness on each side. So I reached out to one of our tooling vendors, and I got some estimates on it, and I learned a lot because it got into some stuff that I've never messed with. And what he come up with, his suggestion, this was going to be in our manual HBM. So 50 taper base, if you will, a Capto adapter that would attach to that. And it was going to be one of those fancy anti-vibe extensions. I've seen Octane Work Holding use boring bars like that, and he's boring like 15 times D deep. It's absurd. He's not even having to bore that deep. He's just got the bar stuck out that far because he can. and then your actual modular boring head on the end of it. It's really cool setup, and it would probably work great. It's just very expensive. I'm talking on the order of $8,000 or $9,000. So yeah, it's there's other ways to go about it. And this is just the one I've seen. That he also offered me an alternative where you had the Cat 50 base and you could stack two Capto, just regular steel Capto extensions on top of that, and then your boring head. But he said it's really not ideal to stack multiple extensions like that, especially over that length. Because it was, I think the diameter of the extension was 60 millimeter. So, 2 3/8 in freedom units. And then the stick out was like 18 inches. So that's getting out there. Um, Unfortunately, I probably won't know how it works out because we're probably not going to go that route. But that's if you're ever in that situation, that's definitely what I'd look into. I would try to avoid the old school Bridgeport Criterion boring heads if you can. I mean, they work for that, but if you're using it in the CNC, you probably want to get a real Cat 40, Cat 50 shank, and a one-piece boring head that you can get depth if you need it, but if you don't need it, you don't have to have it.
Yeah. We've got a, I think it's from Big Kaiser or something. It's a digital boring head. It's not the kind you hook up to your phone and all that shit. It's literally just a screen that tells you what you're doing. You can zero it. So if you say you run a bore and you're like, all right, I need 2 more thousandths, it's zeroed, and you just go 2 thousandths, and then you go.
Can you bore it, measure it, and set it at what it's at so you can just adjust from there? You know what I mean?
So I don't know, we don't have a good way of setting the diameter beforehand, or you could do a test hole. Really, you could interpolate a hole and then drop it in the center there and kind of feed it out until it's where you need it.
Yeah.
I usually just eyeball it and just kind of guess it's probably close. But what you can do, so, we got tool setters on all the machines, so you can actually check the diameter with the tool setter, and it'll tell you. So that's why I eyeball it, check it like that. Then you can dial it from there, check it again, make sure you're close to where you want to be. And obviously don't ever go straight for it because you don't know how it's going to react. I mean, it's like boring on a lathe. If your boring bar is stuck out a little bit further, your bore might end up smaller than you expected or something. So, always start undersized, run it. But I'll creep it out on the first one. And then, once I'm getting close and I can got a good feel for how it's reacting every time I offset it out the same amount, then I'll go through and finish the rest of the, or not finish, but pre-finish the rest of the holes, with the same amount of, I guess, step over, same pass, whatever. Measure them all, make sure they're all changing together, make sure they're all changing the same amount, then dial it to my finish and run it. The main issue I have with it is, which is a parameter thing. There's when you do a boring cycle, I don't know what the G code is for it. But anyway, it's a boring cycle. You can set, obviously your RPM, feed rate, depth, shift amount. So how much it'll shift over once it gets to the bottom and the spindle stops. But the shift direction I've had trouble with. And it's been a minute since I've done it, so I need to look back into it. But on one machine, it shifted the correct direction, but then another one it didn't. I tried looking all over the place at forums and stuff like that. I don't remember finding it, so you need to dig into that some. But they're really nice, especially if you have a digital one where you don't have to because from my understanding, I haven't used a, I guess, a dial bore gauge where it's just got a, a little dial wheel on it. I haven't used one of those, but from my understanding is it's not like a one-to-one thing. So it's not like if you need 2 thousandths, you go 2 thousandths. There's always a formula for it or a ratio to it. So you have to do math in order to figure out all right, I need to go this many increments, which, not a big deal doing math or whatever, but you're introducing an opportunity for error there, which I don't like. So your route was definitely a good option for us, especially considering we hardly ever use the thing. I mean, it's once in a blue moon we use it. It's nice to have though, especially whenever you need like accurate, like perfectly round holes,
Mhm.
perfect locations. So
Yeah. I know, like I said, all of our boring heads were the old school, like you just talked about, put put a boring bar in it, and then you've got a dovetail slide. Um,
yeah,
and I think
I guess you can just go with that and like kiss the top of some material and measure that, can't you?
you
Yeah,
could, yeah.
I've
Um,
never done it on a manual, so
right. It's the biggest thing is some of ours are direct. So, like, if you dial a thousandth on the dial, it takes a thousandth.
Mhm.
Some of them are to where it moves a thousandth, which means it takes two.
Yeah,
So it reads radius, and some manual lathes
put a
are
slide on a lathe.
exactly.
Yeah,
Some lathes are that way.
that'll mess you up on it.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of times, I mean, the one that I picture in my head, it's actually got a diameter symbol next to the increment, so it's telling you each mark is a thousandth on diameter,
Yeah,
not radius. But you never know. When the manual machinist that we have, I've done it too. He's actually used boring heads to cut just radiuses in the end of parts, like coping out a tube or something like that,
yeah.
where you don't have a on-size cutter for it. And for quick setting a boring head, like what you're talking earlier, Cam, one thing I've done is pick up on the edge of like a piece of aluminum or something that's
Yeah.
square, center my spindle over that, zero out, and then move over the radius that I want.
Mhm.
And then you can put your boring head in and basically adjust it out until it just barely
Basically touches
touches.
off. Yeah.
Exactly. And then,
And you know, I've seen that I've seen other people do that, and I always forget that it's an option. I
right,
always forget about it when I need it.
right.
Rip my nail.
Well, how often do you need it? That's the
Yeah,
thing.
hardly ever.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
The I do love that boring head. We've made a lot of, like, fixture plates for horizontals, that fit, like, your standard pallet
mm,
sizes, and, the customer we do it for uses, like, ball lock systems, so we gotta install a lot of ball lock liners and stuff like that, and
mm,
having a boring head for that is super handy.
yeah,
You
I
can
bet.
especially once you get it dialed, I mean, you just, feed into all those and dead on the right location, but also, like, man, when you press those things in, which I always hit them in with a hammer, but, like, when you press them in, it feels I don't know. There's a different feeling to it, and it feels right. Like, it just feels
Mhm.
perfect once you get it dialed perfect, but I can tell a difference whenever I interpolate it with a mill, like, just having that, like, maybe 2 thousandths of difference in circularity. Um, yeah, something's different about it.
Mhm. For sure. Brad,
Pat.
do you consider yourself to be successful?
Yeah, I do. I mean, define success.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode.
What's the definition of success?
Good
I
question.
guess I guess it's different for everybody.
It
How many
depends.
It
it
depends.
depends.
I think my question would be, are you basing your definition of success or your perception of success off of other people or off of your own?
Mhm.
I would say off of my own.
Yeah.
And that's what you should do, I would say.
And I would say I don't know if I'd give it a definition, but I would say I'm successful because I'm comfortable where I'm at in business and personal life, with financial stability, personal goals, relationships, I guess, would be part of it.
Mhm.
Just, I'm not chasing to get rich. I'm chasing to be comfortable and I'm there. So I'd say I'm successful in my definition.
Yeah. I think when you say you're comfortable with where you're at, that always raises red flags to me. Now, obviously, you're kind of at the point where you've made it. Like
Yep.
there is some sort of like subconscious mental goal for you.
Yeah.
I would guess. Yeah, it's like get to the point where I don't have to bust my ass every day. I can spend time with my family. I can go to all the baseball games and football games and all that stuff. do stuff with the wife, not hurting for money, like that kind of mental goal you might have had.
Yep.
uh, being comfortable with where you're at once you've met those goals is
Yeah.
good. I'd say being comfortable with where you're at whenever you haven't really accomplished anything, at least for me, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because then it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
For me, I would say for me, success may not be once you've made it specifically to a goal. For me, it's constant improvement.
Yep.
That would be my thing. I'm as long as I'm improving, then I'm good. I'm happy.
Yep.
So, given that, Cam, do you consider yourself successful?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think. Again, it's different for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm happy with where I'm at now based on where I started. Like even just machining, for example. Like I've been machining, next month will be 5 years, right? And now I'm at the point where I'm managing a machine shop, and I'm the lead programmer in a machine shop. Granted, I was able to. I happened into a shop that had a lot of room for me to grow and fill those positions. However, I still busted my ass to gain the trust and gain the knowledge and um, enough good judgment in order to be in these positions. And so it's been constant improvement from the time I started machining to where I'm at today, and I'm not done yet. So I wouldn't say I've made it, but I would still consider myself successful considering how much I've grown.
How about you, Pat? Where are you at?
No,
No?
I feel like I'm working towards it. I don't feel like I can consider myself successful until I've gotten to where I want to be. Which means it can get to where I'm hard on myself for that, right? Um, there's a famous quote out there. I don't know who said it, but our friend Possum said it the other day in our group chat. Comparison is the thief of joy. If I sit here and I compare myself to other people that have brand new trucks, boats, um, uh, kids, maybe, um, a nice fancy house, um, it makes me unhappy because I'm sitting here struggling with living in a camper, trying to build a house. Um, I've got old vehicles that will need replaced before long, but I do take solace in the fact that I'm happy. I have a good wife. I am in a position as far as owning property that a lot of people would want to be in.
Definitely.
And that's hard to remember. Um, and then the thing with comparison is you never see the bad side of it. You just see what you see.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the big house and the big family that looks happy, and the fancy cars. You don't see the payments. You don't see the fights. You don't see the cheating that might be going on. Hopefully not. Um, so it's easy to lose sight of the fact that you're in a stable, loving relationship. You're in maybe not ideal, but you're in a stable, living environment. And I mean, I certainly do fine financially, even just being a single income household. My wife doesn't work, but we make it just fine. And maybe part of that's because we have, lower expectations or lower desires than other people, but that's our taste. Some folks like the fancy houses and the new cars and the boats and this and that. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I'll define myself as successful when I have a house built that I'm proud of and I can really start maybe a family and just feel stable. even if I'm making payments, mortgage payments or whatever, if I can cover that and be fine, which I will, and I'm happy, my wife's happy, that's pretty darn good.
Yep.
I guess I don't consider myself successful yet, but I'm working on it.
I think you're successful.
It's
Not to blow smoke up. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I mean,
yeah,
consider all this you just said. I mean, how many acres do you own? You've got
right.
a shop house built or shop house thing in the process.
Mhm.
You don't have debt. That right there puts you ahead of most people.
Mhm.
Right.
So,
Especially at your age.
yep. Lead
Right.
programmer, you got a good career and a career that you enjoy too. Shit,
Right.
that alone, man. I think just about anybody who loves machining is actually machining every day. I
Mhm.
mean, you're ahead of most people. How many people do you hear Sunday night like, "Oh shit, man, work tomorrow. Oh man, it's
Sure.
terrible." And me and a guy at work were just talking about this today. Because he's telling me, he's like, "Man, I love like getting up and coming to work. Like I love
Mhm.
working here. It's awesome because it's laid back, but also like it's cool. Like you're making parts all day, whatever, learning, improving. Um, but just enjoying going to work every day or enjoying your career in general. I mean,
Mhm.
that puts you ahead of I don't know what percentage of people that would be, but it's a majority.
A lot. That's and see, that's where perspective comes into play.
Yeah.
It's easy to and that's where, like I said, I'm bad for that. I lose sight of what I've done and where I've been,
Yep.
and I'm only looking at what I hope is ahead of me, and that helps keep me going. Keeps wanting me to grow and work towards these things, but I guess that's just a quirk of mine is I forget very easily where I've come from because one of my coworkers and I were reminiscing the other day about stuff. Um, I mean, I've worked here for 10 years and 4 months or something like that. I've come a long way,
Yeah.
and I forget that. It's
Easy to
great.
get.
10 years goes by quickly, and that's actually one reason I'm kind of glad that I started my Instagram page, you know, 6 years ago this year, because it's almost like a chronicle where I can go back and look and not only remember the good times and the people that have come and gone and stuff like that, um, but I remember, oh man, that job was hard, but I did it, and now I could do that with my hand tied behind my back.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yep. Yep. No, it's easy to forget
Mhm.
how far you've come on something. Yeah, I mean, you get wrapped up in the day to day life. Everybody's guilty of it. You get wrapped up in day to day life, and it's just another part of life.
Mhm.
I don't know. You don't think much of it whenever you can be. Well, I mean, if you want to keep it on a work level, I mean, you can be programming some sort of stupid complex part that I don't know, requires a ton of experience, and you don't think anything of it. You're just like, "Ah, I'll just approach it like this, and I'll do it this way." I've seen this
Mhm.
kind of stuff before, not a huge deal. But then you have somebody who's, like, just getting in the game, right? They're trying to learn how to program, and they're looking at this like, "I can't even comprehend this print." Like,
Mhm.
how are you even doing that?
Hmm. I realize now I've been on both ends of that now
Yep.
because I remember when I was first barely starting to get started in programming, the guy that taught me, his name was Jeremy, um, he was showing me a print of a part. It was a Japanese print from like the 90s or 80s or something. I mean, it looked rough. It's probably been faxed 3 times and copied 5 times and,
Yeah.
and so I looked at it and I'm like, I have no idea what this is supposed to look like. This thing could be shaped like an airplane or it could be shaped like a turtle for all I know. But now and he helped kind of orient my mind around how do you turn this jumbled mess of nonsense into a rough idea of what that part should look like. And it's a good thing because he had to model that part. Now 10, well, 9, probably 9 years later, I can do that myself. And I've shown other people that were my age then the same thing. And it's wild.
Yep.
So to summarize, you have to define your own success, I think.
Yep.
But however you define that, and it will change over time as you, whoever you might be, as you grow, as you mature, as you go through life, your goals will change, and how you define being successful will change. But whatever you do, pursue it.
Yeah. Pursuing is a big one. Come across a lot of people who don't pursue things.
Mhm.
Yeah, with hiring employees, and I don't know, it surprises me how many people are okay with just showing up, punching the clock, and going home,
Mm-hmm.
not going anywhere past that. And I mean, some people, they're happy with that, and that's cool. Do your thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like, they'll complain about going to work, but then when they get to work, they don't do anything to make it better. They don't do anything to improve their own situation. They're not hungry to learn. They're not hungry to improve. They're not hungry to grow. They just kind of show up and like, yeah, another day, punch the clock. All right, going home. Gonna go sit in the living room and eat Domino's, watch TV. It's been frustrating. And a lot of it is we've hired young guys, and so like they're just finding their way into the world, and they don't understand like whenever somebody is in front of you saying like, "Hey, this is a new job for you, but this job can turn into a pretty awesome career. Here's a bunch of resources. I'll teach you everything I know. Let's get it." They just don't understand like how awesome of a thing that is.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm sure part of that comes from like, being in public school, for example. Um, doesn't really matter if you do that good or not, as long as you pass.
Right.
Especially if you're coming to work for us, you're not going to college, you've already made that decision. You're 19, 20 years old working for us. Obviously, you're not in school. So,
Mhm.
the grades didn't really matter much to you. So, spend a lot of time in school where nothing's really serious. It doesn't matter that much if you learn it or not. It doesn't matter if you retain it. All you need to do is learn enough to pass a test and move on. Then on top of that, I mean, you can fucking Google everything you want to know nowadays. And so information retention doesn't matter. So when you get into a job like this where you can't Google everything, you need to rely on some of the stuff people are teaching you. They're not ready to do it.
Yeah, I remember when I first got started here, the manager at that time, his name was Brad, and unfortunately, he's passed away recently. But one thing he told me really stuck with me, and that was, I love teaching people. I hate teaching people twice,
Yep.
and that, I mean, timid me, coming out of tech school, coming into this job that I'm scared to death of to do. Um, it didn't scare me. It just taught me that pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest thing that I see other people, younger and older, not just younger, but I feel like it biases more towards younger people. I say as somebody that's 30. Um, pay attention. That's all I can ask is get your mind off of hunting, fishing, boats, dogs, your girlfriend,
Like in social media,
Facebook,
Instagram,
politics, all that stuff. Get away from that.
except the Practical Machinist form. Stay on that.
Exactly. And I mean, hey, if you want to have the Impractical Machinist podcast in your ear,
Yeah,
be all right.
it's pretty good. Keep that going.
But focus, pay attention to where I don't have to tell you for the fifth time what this insert looks like, or
Yeah.
this, how to operate this saw, or
And
whatever.
I think that's one place that I've gone wrong with new people is, I tell them like, pretty much all of them, whenever they show up, I say, get a notebook and a pen, keep it with you all the time. So whenever I teach you something, you write it down, you've got it there. Like, I mean, I'm sure most people listening to this have used a FANUC control. I mean, you go to do a tool change on a FANUC control, the first time you walk up to that thing, you're not going to have an idea what to do. And I show you once, I'm like, all right, you need to go MDI, M6 T1 and a block insert. Go.
Hold on, what M6T1? You got that backwards.
Doesn't actually matter.
You got to call the tool up first and then do the tool change.
Yeah. Well, this is the 21st century, so
Oh,
we're not using tape here. It'll be okay. But yeah, so T1 M6 and Euro 6 if you really want to be special.
How about TO1 MO6?
Oh yeah, there we go. Get all the digits. But yeah, anyways, you teach them this shit, and they're like, "All right, cool. Don't write it down, or do write it down, but you can scratch it, forget what they wrote it, whatever." But then, for me, the bottom line is always, we need to get the machines running, or we need to make sure, like, we're being productive, we're being mostly efficient, we're getting somewhere. So whenever they forget what it was that I taught them once, I'm like, "All right, pay attention, show them again." Then 2 weeks later, it's like, "Dude, I already told you this twice." But I still show them again. And so I think that's where I've gone wrong, is I continued to kind of perpetuate that. And I'm like, well, what matters right now is that we get this machine running, like we kind of get somewhere. We don't spend, the first half of the day you just trying to figure out how to get, a basic part set up and running. So I think ultimately what I need to do is, like, I'll teach you once, I'm not teaching you twice. All right. So pay attention. And then whenever the time actually comes for me to teach them twice, just tell them to figure it out.
yeah.
However, but then I feel like a dick doing that too, because I'm like, there's a lot of information. Like, especially in the beginning, like, you're getting information through a fire hose. So I
Mhm.
fully expect people to not remember everything they're taught out of the gate. And so I don't know. It's a fine line.
The first couple shops I worked at, I was always told by the owners, if you don't want to be here, go home. I don't have time to hold your hand. You got to pay attention. You got to learn. You're going to be out in the shop working on your own. You need to know what you need to know.
Mhm.
So I always took it serious. I got a little note. I still have it from 20 years ago. I had a little field notes notebook, and I kept a lot of shit in there. Reference it if I needed to.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got all my Fidal notes.
Yeah, and that goes a long way. I'm kind of like you, Cam. I mean, I I'm gentle with people. I don't have any reason to bust somebody's chops for coming asking me the same question, 5 times over a 6-month time frame. It's not like it's every other day,
Right.
but I feel similar, where I should be a little bit harder, not harder, but kind of a thought process more of like, teach them the first time, show them thoroughly. The second time, if they come ask you, you could throw it at them like, "What do you think you do?" And get them to think through it themselves. And if they're wrong, well, either let them find out they're wrong if it's not going to be something detrimental or too detrimental, or let them know, no, it's this.
Yeah.
And because for myself, and you're probably similar, I learned by figuring it out.
As far as teaching people goes, I like to kind of take the crawl, walk, run approach if I can. So, for example, with teaching, like, this is the first time they're ever looking at a machine and they got to do a tool change, for example. Um, Doing, the MDI, T01, M06, and a block insert, that whole thing. I'm going to show you the first time, be like, all right, look, when we got to change tools, this is how we do it. So I'm going to show them, like, just watch me. I'm going to type this stuff in. This is what I type. Here you go. Boom. And then the tool pops up magically, right? Then the second time, I'm like, all right, I want you to do this. I'm going to walk you through it. Let's go. All right, you're going to hit NDI. Now you're going to type in all the things, into block insert, cycle start, all that stuff. All right, cool. Now you've done it. Now you've got a general idea of how this is supposed to work. And then the third time, I'm going to stand back. You do it. Then whenever you get stuck, I'll help you.
Mhm.
And so that seems to be a pretty good way to do it. However, I still run into the problem of guys just not retaining it. And I think ultimately is what it comes down to is, like, I guess the mentality of, like, if you don't want to be here, go home, right?
Mhm.
I'm putting this effort into you so that you can try to learn this trade and you can try to be self-sufficient and do things on your own. And if you're not going to retain the information, then just don't be here. because I don't have time for it. I literally don't have time for it. It slows me down so much whenever we get new people, just spending time training them and trying to get them up to speed, get them to be somewhat self-sufficient, and then kind of go from there. That initial like 1 or 2 months is rough.
For sure. Yeah. It's tough starting out with new people, especially if you've lost somebody and then you're having to kind of do that again.
Right.
I was going to say that's the starting out with new people, especially if you've lost, is the kicker, the flip side of that, pays attention and say, would. And mine would too.
What I tell everybody is the less work the people above you have to do because of you, the more you get paid. The easier you make our lives, the more money we'll pay you. But we
That's a
stick
very
to it
good way
too.
to look at it.
Nobody has ever asked for a raise. We've always given people raises. Well, I can't speak for everybody. For myself and for our other employee that's been there the longest after me, both of us have agreed, like, about the time we start thinking, like, man, I'm kind of doing a lot more around here. But then what's really cool is to see all that stuff kind of compound into having that conversation with an employee today where he's like, yeah, man, I mean, like, I love coming to work. I don't have that, like, the dread every night that I got to wake up tomorrow and like, oh, damn, I got to go to work. And so it's cool to get to that point. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed coming to work. If I didn't have kids, I'd be here 7 days a week.
Yep. Yeah, I've got to cut myself off sometimes because I feel like I'm strung out. Almost like spend too much time with my brain in machinist mode and just geeking out on everything.
Sometimes you got to walk away.
Yeah. But that Christmas break was good for me. Well, wherever you're listening to this, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe if you can. We appreciate any engagement we can get. We need whatever you'll give us. So
YouTube, Spotify, Apple.
If you've got any ideas for topics or any questions for us, you can either, like Brad said, leave comments or find us on his Instagram, shoot us a DM.
There you have it. Thanks for listening.